Welcome to Verge File.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. She told me she was tired. That's how it always started. Not angry, not cold, just distant. A shoulder turned away, a sigh before sleep. Long day, she'd say, curling up like I wasn't even there. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I told myself real intimacy is about more than physical touch. That sometimes you wait for love, for patience, for the person you committed to. But waiting turned into silence. And silence turned into questions. Because over time, it wasn't just the bedroom. It was her eyes, her voice, her absence in small ways that began to pile up into something massive. She'd laugh at texts she never explained. Smile at notifications she never showed. Lock her phone when she used to toss it face up on the couch. She said she wasn't in the mood. But I saw how she lit up when someone else walked into the room. His name was Matt, a coworker, the kind of guy who makes women feel seen, even when they're already being watched. He'd comment on her posts in the middle of the night. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. She said he was just a friend, that they were on a project together, that she had to stay late. I believed her because I wanted to. Because the truth is, sometimes a man would rather be lied to than realize he's already been replaced. The first real crack happened on a Thursday. I got home early, surprised her. She wasn't there. Her car was gone. Her phone went straight to voicemail. When she walked in 3 hours later, smelling like some cologne that wasn't mine, she didn't flinch. She said they had a team dinner. Nothing special. Everyone was there. I nodded. But I already knew. A week earlier, I installed a small camera outside our house. Package theft had gotten bad in our neighborhood. At least, that was my excuse to her. That Thursday night, after she went to bed, turned away from me again, I reviewed the footage. At 6:42 p.m., she left the house wearing a short black dress I hadn't seen her wear in months. At 6:58, she got into a car that wasn't an Uber. At 1:12 a.m., that same car dropped her off, and he walked her to the door. She hugged him, held it too long, and then kissed him. Soft, slow, like it wasn't the first time. I didn't confront her. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, realizing the woman next to me in bed had finally decided to give her warmth again, but not to me. She said she wasn't in the mood. She lied. She just wasn't in the mood for me. I didn't tell her I saw the footage. Not yet. Because silence is sharper than confrontation, quieter than rage, but it cuts deeper. She came home, tossed her bag, walked past me like nothing happened. Said she was tired. Again. I nodded. Again. Her lies weren't even creative anymore. She didn't notice I'd stopped asking how her day went. Didn't notice that I didn't try to touch her that night. Or the next. And still, she didn't reach for me either. That's when I knew she wasn't ashamed. She'd simply moved on. Emotionally, physically, strategically. Whatever we once were had become something she endured instead of something she wanted. But I wasn't ready to explode. Not yet. I was ready to collect. Over the next week, I stopped reacting and started watching. Patterns. Habits. She left every Tuesday and Thursday around 6. Always dressed up. Always team meetings. Sometimes she'd leave her perfume out, like she wanted me to smell the version of her she gave to someone else. I checked the cameras. Always the same car. Same guy. Same subtle touches. She didn't run into his arms. She walked like she belonged there. Thursday night, I copied the footage to a drive. No labels. No confrontation. Just preparation. Then I went further. I checked our joint bank statements. She was slick, used cash mostly. But I caught it. Hotel bar. Same 2 nights. Same time frame. 1 room. 1 name, his. Matt. The man she was mentoring. That word echoed in my head like a sick joke. She mentored him into our bed, just not the one we shared. She gave him what I hadn't touched in months. Her skin. Her voice. Her body. And now I understood. Her coldness wasn't exhaustion. It was strategy. She'd starved me on purpose. Withheld affection so long that when she finally offered it again, it would feel like salvation. Like a prize. Like she was doing me a favor. But the prize wasn't mine anymore. That Sunday she tried. She came up behind me in the kitchen, wrapped her arms around my waist, whispered, "I've missed you." Her breath touched my neck like she still owned a part of me. I didn't move. Didn't respond. She pulled away after a few seconds. I saw it then, for the first time in weeks, real confusion on her face. Like she couldn't compute why I hadn't melted. Why I didn't turn to kiss her. Why I didn't beg to feel close again. Because she didn't know. She didn't know I'd already let go. And the cruelest part? I watched her offer me intimacy like it was a weapon. Like if she touched me first, I'd forget the nights she touched someone else. But I didn't forget. And now, she was holding nothing. After that failed Sunday morning hug, she shifted tactics. Suddenly, she started remembering things she used to forget. My coffee, black, no sugar. That I liked my t-shirts folded, not hung. She started putting on music I hadn't heard in months, the kind we used to slow dance to in the living room after long days. She laughed louder at my jokes, asked about my projects again, lingered in the kitchen just long enough for me to notice the perfume I'd once buried my face in. But I didn't say a word. She was throwing sparks at Ash. The woman who had spent months turning away from my touch now tried to brush her hand against mine when passing me the remote. She left the bathroom door open again, like before, like she wanted me to look at her. But I didn't. I'd already watched her undress on someone else's camera. That image burned hotter than anything she could do now. She cooked more. Wore the robe I once said made her look dangerous in the best way. Her makeup was softer. Her voice gentler. But all of it was theater, and I was no longer the audience. She thought she could pull me back into the play, that my silence meant weakness. She had no idea it was the sound of a man calculating his exit with surgical precision. The power had shifted, and she felt it. That Tuesday, I came home a bit later. Her face lit up like she'd waited for hours, like she was afraid I wouldn't return. She asked if I wanted dinner. I told her I'd already eaten. That was the first crack in her mask. The next day, she texted me in the middle of a meeting, just a selfie of her in bed, captioned, "Thinking of you." I stared at it for a second, then archived the thread. No reply. She was offering me a version of her I'd begged for months ago. But that version had expired. Now every gesture felt like a cover-up, like someone planting evidence at the scene of a crime she swore never happened. But I had proof. I had the footage, the receipts, the patterns. And more than that, I had clarity. I wasn't hers anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was beyond that. My silence wasn't restraint. It was closure in motion. That Friday night, she reached for my hand on the couch. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. I just didn't hold back. I let her feel the absence she'd created. She leaned in, asked softly, "Are we okay?" I looked straight ahead. Calm. Distant. She waited for a reply I'd never give. And I realized she was finally scared. Not of losing me, but of realizing I was already gone. She tried to resurrect what she'd already killed. But I don't resurrect dead things. I bury them and walk away without a funeral. You can feel it when someone starts fearing your distance more than they ever feared losing your love. It's in the way they hesitate, the way their voice softens at the end of sentences, unsure if it still matters. And by that Thursday, Ashley had shifted from rehearsed affection to desperate improvisation. She stopped pretending. That night, she crawled into bed quietly, no makeup, no pretense. Just her, like she thought being raw would rewind time. She placed her hand on my chest and whispered something I didn't quite catch. I didn't ask her to repeat it, because I no longer cared what she said. She used to make me beg for touch. Now she was offering it like a bribe to stay. But what she never understood is that men like me don't beg twice. In the morning, she lingered in the doorway while I got dressed for work. Said she was thinking of making pancakes. I nodded and walked past her like she was furniture. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. My silence had stopped being passive. It was now a language she could finally feel. Every minute of her indifference had been a brick. I was just letting her walk the halls of the prison she built with her own hands. That weekend, she asked if I wanted to go out, just us. Said we hadn't done that in a while. I said I had errands. Truth? I just drove. No destination. No music. Just the sound of tires on pavement and a quiet engine, like my thoughts. I parked outside the gym. Walked in. Rejoined the world. Started lifting again. Saw familiar faces. Got nods from people who remembered the version of me before I became invisible in my own home. I stayed longer than I needed. Not to avoid her, but to remember myself. When I came back, she was on the couch in my hoodie. Her eyes searched mine. She started to speak, but stopped. She saw it. The detachment. The cold precision. She asked if I was okay. I told her I'd never been clearer. That night, I moved some of my things into the guest room. Didn't say why. Didn't ask. Just did. The silence was sharp. Surgical. She didn't question it, because deep down, she already knew. This wasn't a man punishing her. This was a man closing files. The next morning, she touched my shoulder in the kitchen, like maybe this time, I'd fold. I didn't. She said, "I miss you." I said, "I know," and walked out the door. You only have to say goodbye once. After that, every action just writes it in darker ink. I had stopped answering her silence. Now she was the one left speaking into a void. And for the first time, she heard it echo. The shift was complete when I stopped needing her to feel anything at all. Not guilt, not regret, not even an apology. I'd crossed into that calm where you no longer crave closure, because you've already started building the next chapter with her absence as the foundation. I changed my schedule without telling her. Left the house early. Stayed out later. Not to chase revenge. Just peace. I didn't slam doors or leave angry notes. I left air. And silence. And space that used to belong to her. She started texting more often. Not to talk, but to track. Where are you? What time are you home? Are we okay? I didn't answer the first few. The fifth one just got a "don't wait up." That's when she panicked. She cleaned the house. Wore makeup on a random Wednesday. Cooked my favorite meal. I came home and ate in silence. She asked how my day was. I said, "Productive." Nothing more. Nothing less. Then I went into the other room and closed the door. She followed a few minutes later. Said she missed me. Said she wanted to be close again. Her voice broke on the word "again." I didn't flinch. Not out of cruelty. Out of clarity. You don't revive something that's already decomposed. You bury it and build something better on the ground it used to rot in. She stood there waiting for me to say something. I said nothing. Eventually, she left the room. I didn't chase. I stopped reacting. And that silence became my most effective reply, because she had no counter move for it. No script for a man who no longer feared losing her. Friday morning, I left the house in a suit. Not for work. For a meeting with a realtor. I didn't need the house anymore. I needed space. My space. Without memories rotting in the walls. She saw the folder. Saw the documents. Her hands trembled when she asked if I was selling the house. I said, "No, I'm removing myself from it." I didn't raise my voice. Didn't explain the timeline. Because in her world, the timeline never mattered until it collapsed. Later that day, I moved more things out. Small at first, documents, electronics. Then the heavier stuff. My guitar. My books. My presents. She stood in the hallway as I carried a box past her. She whispered, "Please don't go." I didn't even stop walking. Because the truth is, I'd left weeks ago. My body had just taken longer to follow. The man she thought she could hold with convenience had turned into a man she couldn't even find in her own house. She forgot I could disappear without a sound. Now the silence is the loudest thing she hears. She thought it was just a phase. A cold front in the marriage, something I'd eventually snap out of. She had no idea that the man she once knew had been systematically dismantled and rebuilt into someone who no longer required her presence to breathe. That week, I deleted every photo of us from my phone. Not in anger. In cleansing. I wasn't erasing memories. I was deleting illusions. The smiles in those pictures meant nothing now. They were just digital fossils of a reality that had already gone extinct. She noticed. Asked why the pictures were gone. I didn't answer. Because explaining detachment to someone who weaponized your loyalty is like teaching color to the blind. Instead, I changed all my passwords. Bank accounts. Insurance. Even the emergency contacts. I left no cracks for her to crawl through later. She called my best friend Mark. I know because Mark told me. She asked if we were still close, he said. I told her, closer than ever. That's why I'm not telling you anything. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just lose you a partner. It loses you a tribe. People pick sides. And if you've been solid, if you've carried yourself with quiet dignity, your side stays full. She tried guilt. Left me notes. I made a mistake. We can fix this. You're still my home. I didn't respond to a single one. I didn't tear them up either. I just let them sit, untouched. Like unread mail from a sender I no longer trusted. Her desperation turned into confusion. Then fear. She started calling my office. Asked my assistant if I was okay. The assistant said, "He's focused. He's getting a lot done lately." And I was. Without her noise, my mind was sharper. My workouts got longer. My emails shorter. I slept better. Ate cleaner. I didn't miss her voice. I missed who I was before her voice shaped my day. One night, I drove past the house and didn't stop. Parked down the street, lights off, engine running. I watched the window. She was there, sitting alone at the table. The same table where I once poured everything into someone who drank it all and said she was still thirsty. I looked at that silhouette and felt nothing. Not rage, not sorrow, not even nostalgia, just distance. Real distance. The kind that can't be crossed with a single text or teary apology. That's when I knew I'd already won. Because the moment you stop hoping they'll change is the moment you become untouchable. And she felt it. In every unanswered message. In every key that no longer worked. She was still in the house. But I was no longer in the story. A week after I stopped responding, she came to the new condo. Uninvited. Somehow, she had traced the address, probably through mutual contacts or sheer desperation. She stood at the door in tears. No makeup, just raw panic on her face like she had seen a ghost. And in a way, she had. The man she remembered no longer existed. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. She whispered, "Can I come in?" I said nothing. I just turned around and walked away, leaving the door open, not as a welcome, but as a warning. She followed, tiptoeing like she didn't belong there. She didn't. Her eyes scanned the condo. It was cold, clean, minimal. No photos. No softness. Just steel, glass, and silence. She asked, "Why are you living like this?" Still, I didn't speak. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water, and sat on the bar stool. She stood awkwardly across from me like a guest in someone else's dream. Then she saw it, the drawer. The top drawer of the console table by the window. The only drawer in the place that wasn't locked. She opened it. Inside, she found the envelope. The thick one. The one I had been preparing for weeks. Inside were copies of everything. Divorce papers, asset reallocations, revocation of shared accounts, a notarized letter reclaiming all property rights, and a black USB stick labeled simply, "For clarity." She didn't ask what was on it. She knew. Surveillance footage. GPS logs. Screen-recorded texts she thought she had deleted. Receipts not for revenge, but for truth. She dropped the envelope like it burned. I stood up, walked to the door, and held it open again. This time, she didn't argue. She left with her hands shaking, her lips parted like she wanted to scream, but the air had been sucked out of her lungs. I didn't follow, didn't look out the window to see where she went. I went back to the drawer, closed it, locked it, and dropped the key in the trash. I didn't need it anymore. I had given her everything she never thought I'd have. Proof, resolve, and silence. That night, I changed the locks again. Not because I thought she'd return, but because I had learned that peace needs protecting, too. This wasn't about closure. It was about finality. And she was finally starting to understand. I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was just making sure she never had the chance to hurt me again. 3 days after she opened that drawer, her sister called me. Not to plead, not to scold, just to say one thing. She hasn't eaten. She hasn't left the bed. She says your silence is worse than if you'd screamed. I didn't respond, because it was meant that way. Screaming would have meant I cared enough to feel rage. But silence. Silence was the sound of a door that would never open again. I wasn't tracking her, but I knew where she'd be, back in the old apartment, surrounded by memories she used to control. My name was stripped from the lease. My belongings were gone. The bank accounts she thought were joint were now hers alone, empty. I didn't take what wasn't mine. I just took me out of the equation. I started sleeping better. No anxiety. No checking her location at 3 a.m. No pacing around wondering what lie she'd feed me next. I reconnected with my brother, the one she always called bad energy. He said, "You look dangerous now, like nothing could touch you." He wasn't wrong. I started dressing differently, sharper. Not for revenge, not for a glow-up. For armor. The world treated me different too. Like they saw a man who'd walked through fire barefoot and didn't flinch. I wasn't healed. I was just immune. One night, I got a message from her mother. "She's not okay. I've never seen her like this." I read it. Deleted it. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood. Her collapse wasn't my victory. It was just her turn to stand in the ruins she built. This wasn't a game. There were no winners. Just escapees. She had set fire to a life and expected me to warm my hands by the flames. Instead, I walked away while it burned. The man she betrayed wasn't the man she left behind. I had buried him the moment I saw her reflection in someone else's sunglasses. The day I realized I was just a pit stop in her performance. Now I was untouchable. Not because I became cruel, but because I had learned the discipline of letting go without noise. The silence wasn't for her. It was for me. And that silence said more than rage ever could. She showed up at my work. Not screaming. Not crying. Just standing there. Holding that same set of keys I had duplicated for her 2 years ago. She extended her hand, offering them like a peace treaty I never asked for. I didn't take them. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because there was nothing left to unlock. She whispered something. I think it was my name. But I turned back inside the building before I could hear it. That was the moment she realized this wasn't a punishment. It was permanence. Later that evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. A familiar voice, flat and quiet, said, "I thought you'd yell. I thought you'd at least hate me loud." I didn't respond. She continued, "You were supposed to be safe. I just wanted to feel wanted again. But you disappeared without burning me. That's worse." I hung up. That was the final cut. The moment I knew the loop had closed. There'd be no more calls. No more notes slid under doors. She had tested silence and found it louder than she imagined. I left town the next day for a solo weekend in the mountains. No notifications. No past haunting me in digital echoes. Just breath. Just trees. Just the cold honesty of air that didn't ask who I used to be. Up there, I wrote a list. Not of goals. Not of dreams. But of boundaries. What I'd never tolerate again. What I'd never explain again. Because that was the core of it all. I used to explain myself too much. Used to think love meant over-clarifying pain, narrating betrayal like I owed someone a script for why they hurt me. Not anymore. Back in town, I sold what was left in storage. Burned old letters. Blocked her entire circle. This wasn't vengeance. This was a reboot. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't even healing. I was building from new ground. And as I stepped into that space, job secured, apartment reset, gym routine locked, I saw it clearly. She wasn't a villain. Just a test. One I passed by not reacting. My power wasn't in confrontation. It was an exit. The kind of exit that doesn't slam doors, it erases the whole corridor. Somewhere, in another version of my life, I imagine she still tells her side of the story, how I ghosted her, how I overreacted, how I couldn't handle one mistake. But in my world, the only echo left of her is the silence I finally chose. I never responded to her last email. She'd attached a photo of us, New Year's Eve, the one where we looked invincible. She wrote, "I miss who we were." The irony was sharp, because the version she missed never really existed. It was curated, filtered, edited through charm and performance. I think she misses the man who didn't know yet, the one who still smiled without suspicion. But he's gone. In his place is someone colder, but clean, sharper, but settled. I don't pace rooms anymore. Don't reread texts looking for what she meant. Don't lose hours replaying conversations that ended months ago. I've reclaimed time. And that's the quiet victory no one applauds. Not the transformation in your wardrobe, or the muscle you put back on. It's the silence that no longer feels like punishment. It's freedom. I reconnected with old friends. Not to fill a void, but to realign. I told them nothing about her. Not because I was hiding it, but because her chapter doesn't deserve a retelling. Some endings are just ends. I even found myself smiling at someone new last week. A cashier. Nothing dramatic. Just a moment. But it felt honest, unforced. That's how I knew I was no longer carrying the weight of her betrayal. It wasn't dragging behind me anymore. It was buried somewhere behind the horizon. She probably still scrolls my profiles. Maybe looking for signs I've moved on. Maybe hoping I haven't. But I don't post for her anymore. Or for anyone. I don't need to prove I'm better. I just am. The man she broke is the man who rebuilt without her blueprint. No more questions. No more explanations. Just movement. And if I ever see her again, which I won't look away out of spite. I'll look through her. The way you look through a glass door you already walked out of. She didn't break me. She revealed me. And now? Now she's just noise I forgot to miss. Drop it in the comments. Hit subscribe. This is where we talk about what doesn't get forgiven.